and welcome. I'm Kamla. My guest today is Christopher Lochhead. He is an author. He's the co-author of a book called Play Bigger: How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. He's the father of 7 hens, and he is a surfer, and he's a priest, and a marketing guy who actually worked in 3 different companies as a marketing head. So welcome, Chris. You came all the way from Santa Cruz, the laid-back beach town, which is south of San Jose.
I paddled all the way up the coast, just took my wetsuit off.
Well, I won't be surprised because one of your co-authors was actually the captain for the America's Cup, Australia, right?
Yeah, Al Ramadan was the chief technology officer for an America's Cup sailing campaign for the Australian team. Yeah, he's an incredible elite sailor and an amazing surfer as well. Great waterman overall.
Okay, so this is the book, Play Bigger: How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. And you wrote this with 3 other people.
I did.
Okay, tell us about the other 3, because you're supposed to be the singer of the band, I think, and the others are just the part of the orchestra.
Well, I wouldn't say that at all. Yeah, one of the things that Kevin, one of my co-authors, says in the beginning of the book, he wrote the introduction. He says that most books are written by a soloist, and this one's written by a band, so it's an analogy. So yeah, there's 4 of us. Dave Peterson, former entrepreneur, marketing executive who's now a coach as well, business coach and category designer. Al Ramadan, who we just talked about, and Kevin Maney and myself. And Kevin Maney was the head tech writer at USA Today for years and author of several bestsellers.
And Dave was at one point your junior at one of the companies, and he saw how much you're getting paid, and the age difference between you and him was like 18 months or something. And he's like, how can you earn so much and I'm earning pittance, right?
At the time, Dave has done very well for himself since then, but at the time, yeah, he was the low man on the totem pole, and at least in the marketing organization, I was the head of marketing. And when the Securities and Exchange Commission filings came out, they put out your age and your salary. Always a fun day. And he walked into my office and, yeah, he said, you're only 18 months older than me and you make $500,000 a year and I make $50,000 a year. Something's wrong. What's going on? How did this happen?
So what advice did you give him?
I said to him, in business and in life, you have to position yourself or you're going to get positioned. And I positioned myself as a senior executive, and unfortunately you position yourself as the low man on the totem pole. And if you want, we can talk about how you can change that, but that's where we started. Position yourself or be positioned.
How old were you then?
Probably 29, 28.
So how did you learn to position yourself in 9 short years? Because when you were 18, you failed miserably, and you admit to it. And you and your, I guess, your comrade in arms started a company that didn't do very well. Where then did you learn how to position yourself and be at the head of the totem pole? Because you dropped out of high school. Yeah.
So I got thrown out of school, like you said, when I was 18. And I had a part-time job working as an orderly in a hospital. And so my options were do that or start a company. Nobody was going to hire me. I had no money, no connections, no education, no nothing. And so I started my first company really early, and we had some success, and then we wrapped it around the lamppost. And I had to pay off a whole bunch of debt and go get a job, and ultimately ended up starting another company. But to get back to your point, I position myself by being an entrepreneur. When you start a company and you're a founder, co-founder, CEO, whatever it is you are, and you carry yourself in a particular way, even at a young age, people do treat you differently. And I did all the things I tried to, you try to do to look older. I grew a beard. At the time I had hair. And, so I tried to carry myself like an executive or an entrepreneur would.
But did anybody call you a bluff?
No.
Why? What was, that's what I'm
There
trying
was
to
no
get.
bluff. I mean, if anybody ever, I didn't lie to anybody about anything ever, but.
You just had that confidence.
Yeah, and truth be told, the first company I co-founded with my friend Jack, the 2 of us were sitting there, he was 19, I was 18, we said, well, no one's going to buy anything from us. We're starting a technology company. And he was a dropout as well. Sorry, Jack. So we said, well, no one's going to hire us. What do we do? He said, well, we got to make up a guy. So we named the company after a make-believe guy named Roger Pierce, or I grew up in Montreal, Canada, so we called it Roger Pierce.
The French accent.
Yes, Roger Pierce. And and my business card said partner associé. So everybody just thought, you know, we were these two young guys. Hopefully we looked a few years older, and there was this 55-year-old guy named Roger Pierce running the show. And whenever anybody called and asked for him, we'd just say, well, sorry, he's in Geneva. Can I help you? Because if you were Roger Pierce, you'd be in Geneva. And so that sort of got me over the first hump. And then after that, I just kept, if you will, playing bigger.
So I guess you just learned from a school of hard knocks.
Very much so.
Being out there and not hiding the fact that you had not done well in your first company and that you had
No, I told everybody the truth. We failed.
So
split the debt in half and paid everybody off. That's what we did.
How shocked were the people that you had to pay the debt with what you came and said? Because I don't think that's very common, right, for somebody who's as young as you guys were to say that we failed and we're going to pay you off with whatever we can. So I'm just trying to figure out how, you know, who inspired you? Where did you get those values of saying, you know, I failed? Was it your grandfather?
My grandfather, for sure, and my family. My dad's a great man. My mom, who, you know, just great working class, old school Scottish values.
No nonsense.
No nonsense. My grandmother on my dad's side was very, very direct. And so, yeah, I come from a family that's very direct, very working class, and if you will, good Scottish stock. And so we had no other way to deal with it. I mean, look, the company had failed. We owed these people money, and you had to tell them the truth. You sit down and say, hey, we owe you this money. We're shutting the business. We're going to pay you back, and let's talk about when and how we deal with it. And that was it.
So then how did you become Chief Marketing Officer at the age of 29 at this startup in Silicon Valley? How did that happen?
Well, fast forward a few years. My first sort of real attempt at today what we call category design was in the early days of a new technology at the time that was called Salesforce Automation. And Salesforce Automation has now morphed into this thing called CRM, or Customer Relationship Management. So, you know, think about the kind of early 90s. And
ACT was the one, gold mine, those
yes.
were the things people used.
Yes, very much so. And so that was contact management software, and that was the beginning, right?
Right.
And I was fascinated by that because I had a natural drawnness, if you will, to the sales and marketing and business side. I have no technical skills. I failed grade 10 math twice. But I did gain a deep appreciation of the technology, and what began to fascinate me was the application of technology and how it could make a difference. And I wanted to really, that I became obsessed with. I did tons of reading and all sorts of different things to learn. And so when Salesforce Automation first started to come, I thought, wow, a technology being applied to a very human thing, something that I had to learn by doing. I started with Jack and we started with the Yellow Pages and the phone, and cold calling, and that was it. So I could really relate to it as an application, and so I started to work in the field, and I sort of accidentally almost found myself as one of the early kind of people working in Salesforce Automation. I did some speaking and some writing, and there you have it. So I became known in that world for that, and I had a boutique consultancy, and I did a lot of consulting for vendors, and one of those vendors in Silicon Valley acquired my company and moved me down here, and that was 20 years ago.
So it's almost like a film. It's almost like a picture. You know, you only hear about it in. Maybe your grandmother would have a story like that about somebody who came from Scotland and made it big. So it's not very common to see this happen, right? Would you say this is common?
I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it's the American dream.
This is the Canadian dream.
The Canadian, there was a stop in Canada, Scotland, Canada, Silicon Valley dream. But we, luckily, I think I can say this for Canada too, Canada and the United States and a handful of countries around the world are places where you can come from nothing and make something. And I'm very grateful for that. And Silicon Valley is a very special place for that, because I don't ever remember being asked in Silicon Valley where I went to school, or if I even had a degree or any of those things. And so...
Did that surprise you that you were never asked?
I never thought about it. I was just going, 80 hours a week, 400,000 miles a year on a plane.
Is that what makes the Silicon Valley different? That is, how would you define Silicon Valley for somebody who's living outside of this bubble?
The first way I'd describe it in terms of how it's different from other areas is, in Silicon Valley, failure is a feature, not a bug. And so...
And it's good too. It's a must-have feature?
I think so. When I meet young entrepreneurs who want me to join their board or advise or whatever it is they might want me to do, if I'm not sure they're quite there, if there's a little too much hubris, I say to them, hey, you know what? You're a legendary entrepreneur. Call me when you do your next one.
What is this fascination with the word legendary?
It's my second favorite word.
What's your first?
One I can't say on television.
Oh, okay.
So I won't.
No, you shouldn't too.
And I love them both for different reasons. The reason I love the word legendary, first of all, it's a word most people don't use. So when you hear it, it sort of perks your ear up. And I think it catches your ear in a way that says, well, why couldn't I lead a legendary life? Or if you're going to start a company...
But when you overuse it, then the shine wears off, doesn't it?
Oh, I don't care. I believe Mae West was right when she said, too much of a good thing can be wonderful. So,
you're a fan of Mae West now?
Absolutely.
Okay,
she was the most alluring woman in the world at one time, was she not?
She was. She had a way with words.
Yes.
Back to Silicon Valley. So you're describing that failure is a feature here and not a bug. What are the other ways in which you would describe Silicon Valley to somebody who has not been here, has only heard things, and you're part of the Valley, and your story is very much part of what happens in the Valley?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in Silicon Valley, my story is not unique by any stretch of the imagination. Look, Silicon Valley is not perfect. We talk about some of the challenges and problems in the Valley if you want, so I don't want anybody to think I have rose-colored glasses. That said, it sounds corny, but you can come here, get off a plane with nothing, and make something of yourself. If you can produce results, then you can have a legendary career here. And people don't care anywhere near as much about your background or your family or your education, whatever it is. I'm not saying those things aren't important. I'm not saying there aren't people, of course. But if you can produce results, whether you're developing code or marketing software or a salesperson or whatever it is you're doing, then you can have a legendary career here. And there are many, many, many people like myself who come here with nothing, who don't have connections, don't have a background, etc., and make an amazing life for themselves.
So you worked at Vantive, that was the first company.
Yes.
Then you went on to work at Mercury Interactive? Oh,
there was
no,
one
Scient.
in between there. Actually, there was 1.5 in between there. Yeah, Scient.
Scient was, and Scient did what? What did Scient do?
Scient was one of the very early professional services firms focused solely on the internet. So we founded the company in 97, 98. And by 1999, we were already a public company with almost 2,000 people.
And then what happened to Scient?
What happened to Scient is the same thing that happened to most .coms.
Oh, it bombed?
It bombed when all of your customers go night-night at the same time. It's very hard to sustain a business. So at the time, we thought we were the fastest growing professional services company in history. At 3 years old, we had a $9 billion market cap and we were publicly traded. And then we're not sure because nobody tracked this part, but we might have been the fastest shrinking professional services company in history. And so by 2001, it was all over.
So what did you do then?
I took some time off. I did a little consulting and ultimately ended up at Mercury Interactive, like you mentioned.
Which was where, again, you were the chief marketing officer?
Yes.
Okay. And then that got acquired by HP?
It sure did.
For a couple of billions?
5, but who's counting?
Oh, you're counting with the chief marketing. And then you retired?
And then I retired. I moved to Tahoe and...
what did you do at Tahoe? Ski?
I skied 120 days a year, yeah.
Oh, wow. And then you came back to Santa Cruz?
Yeah, and I was learning to surf at the time, so I was kind of going back and forth
And now you're settled in Santa Cruz.
Now I'm settled in Santa Cruz.
Okay. So you all felt the need to write this book. Tell me, you're dyslexic and you're very open about it.
Yes.
So how did you overcome your dyslexia, and what methods did you use to read a book? Because I hear it is difficult when you're dyslexic.
Yeah, well, and it's different for all
Different
dyslexics,
people,
of course.
yeah.
But so the first thing I'd say, Kamala, is I don't believe dyslexia is something you overcome. And I think it's bad context to call it a learning disability, as it has been called for many years. At most, it's a difference. And the truth is, when you dig into it, there are more advantages to being dyslexic than there are disadvantages.
In what ways?
So I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you what I've learned over 48 years of having it and spending a lot of time reading and interacting with people and so forth about it. Most dyslexics appear to be, if you will, top-down versus bottom-up learners. So what I'm told by experts is that the majority of folks, the way they learn something, particularly if you see a big picture, is they get the piece parts, like putting a puzzle together, and then when it all fits, you see there, ta-da, there's the picture. Many of us dyslexics, we won't even deal with the piece parts unless we understand. So we see the big picture, we grasp the big picture first and then work through the details. So that's one difference that many of us have. A lot of us tend to have very creative brains. A lot of us connect dots that other people don't
So you're
connect.
pattern seekers.
A lot of us are much more verbal, very much pattern seekers, and see patterns across different disciplines, very verbal, and incredibly creative. If you look at history, there are many experts who believe Einstein was dyslexic, that Picasso was dyslexic. There's pretty good evidence Steve Jobs was dyslexic.
Really?
John Chambers, the CEO of Cisco Systems.
I've heard Chambers say he's dyslexic.
He's publicly, yeah.
But Jobs was dyslexic?
Yes. Steven Spielberg. And so there's a creative part of the brain that some and many dyslexics have that is pretty unique. And when you put it together with those other things, dyslexics can have a lot of gifts. Now, those gifts come with there's assets and liabilities. I never know where my keys are, Kamala.
That's the key issue is a different thing. But how did you learn to read then?
So by about grade 3, it got really, really, really hard. Reading and math and all that stuff. And our eye does something weird on the page, and so we can read the same sentence over and over again. And so I had to teach myself to do this as I read, so that my finger could make sure I stayed on the right sentence, because we lose ourselves on the page all the time.
Or the sea of words.
It just looks like a mess to us. It's like, to this day, I can't deal with a long thread of emails. So if there's a thread of 15 emails that for some reason I get that included in, I don't even look at it. I just respond and say, call me. I'm not, it's just a morass of garbage.
So then how did you write the book? You talked?
No, well, I did do that, of course, yes. I'll tell you about the process that we came up with, which was actually quite magical. This book was, in 30 years of business, the greatest project I ever worked on, bar none. You know, for dyslexic, writing a book is a challenging thing. We're blessed to have Kevin Maney, who's one of the greatest writers in the technology industry, there as our, you know, guide on the writing side, if you will. But as you know, the writing part is just part of it. It's really what writing is forcing you to do is synthesize all the ideas and then communicate them in this form. And so, yeah, that's a huge challenge as a dyslexic, but a fun one to deal with.
So did you read the book?
Did I read it?
Yeah. No, because if you're dyslexic, I'm just wondering, you know, maybe if there's somebody who's dyslexic out there, they shouldn't think that they can't write a book. That's why I'm
they
asking.
can write a book. I mean, you know, Kevin led us through the writing process, and the magic in the writing is a lot of Kevin. But make no mistake, myself, Dave, and Al, we did a lot of writing too, which then Kevin did his magic to. And so, and I blog a lot, and you know, I've written for Fortune magazine, and I used to have a regular column on CBSnews.com and so forth. So about 15 years ago, Kamala, I realized in business that just like I had learned to become a public speaker, I had to learn how to write.
And read, okay. Tell us about a couple of people that have influenced you. One of them, you say, is Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, which is a Bible for a lot of folks here in Silicon Valley. How to build a company, how to build a product, and then cross the chasm. Who are the others that influenced your thinking and helped you polish your marketing skills and lead 3 Silicon Valley companies? You know, one kind of collapsed, but the other 2 survived.
Yeah. So, you know, when in my case, I'm 18 years old, no experience, no money, no nothing, I want to start a company with my friend Jack. The only ways we could learn were by doing, by seeking out mentors and coaches, and by reading. And so I started to read a ton then, way more than I ever did in school. I also read a lot of technical stuff because I wanted to be, have as much depth as possible. And so you mentioned one, Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. Earlier than that, for me, was David Ogilvy's Ogilvy on Advertising. And all of the recent Trout books, Marketing Warfare, Positioning, 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, Mark McCormick's book, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. And so, for me, it may sound corny. If David Ogilvy doesn't write Ogilvy on Advertising, I don't think you and I are having this conversation.
So those books helped you?
Oh, tremendously. And I will forever be in debt. And we say it in the book that our hope is that we're trying to stand on the shoulders of these incredible people who wrote these things in the past. It's certainly the books that made a difference to me. And the reason, I'll speak for myself and not the other 3 guys, but the reason I wanted to write Play Bigger was there were a handful of people in my life, most notably Peggy Burke, who runs 1185 Design, the preeminent design agency here in Silicon Valley.
Near Stanford.
Yeah. She's also an adjunct professor at Stanford. An amazing, amazing creative talent.
Right across IDEO.
And her husband, Dennis, is one of the co-founders of IDEO. The 2 of them are incredible. And so one day Peggy sat me down and said, look, Christopher, you guys have one of these books in you, and you guys have to write this book. And then she had the subsequent conversation with my partners, and then all of us together. And for several years, and at first, as much as I love and respect Peggy, I just didn't believe that, you know, that we had that kind of thing to say. And over time, she convinced us that even if there was a chance that our book would make 1% the difference that one of those amazing, legendary books had made, then we should probably write it. And so we spent 2 years doing it.
So that's how Play Bigger came. Now let's quickly switch gears. We have 3 minutes, and I need to get to your dudism. What is it? You know, now that you're retired, you've become a priest?
Yes, I'm a priest in the Dudist ministry, in the religion of, based on the teachings of the Big Lebowski.
Okay, so what ties it all together?
Well, I think we drank a lot of White Russians while writing the book.
Did you go to the Safeway with your checkbook and write out 97 cents or whatever he writes?
Pretty much. One of the great things about living in Santa Cruz is you can go to the nicest restaurant in Santa Cruz in your bathrobe if you want.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pretty much. And your flip-flops and your Uggs and all of that stuff. And so, yes, and I think there's a handful of movies that if you watch, you probably don't even need to go to school, and The Big Lebowski is one of them.
How many times have you seen it? Can you recite dialogues from the film?
At least 25.
Can you recite dialogues from the film?
Yes, of course I can. And I think you should just mark it 8, Kamala, is what I think. Oh, and the other one, probably my favorite quote from the movie is, "This aggression will not stand, man."
Walter! It's a film that bottles California.
Oh, it's just a great movie.
You know, all with that California spirit is bottled in that film. So what prompted you to become a priest then? I mean, you're a certified priest. I mean, legally you can officiate marriages?
Yes, I can.
Really?
Yeah. If you go to dudism.org, you can become a Dudist minister. I think it takes about 30 seconds. You fill out a form and away you go.
And how many marriages have you performed?
I have performed 3 now. I performed 2 this summer.
Boy, so you're in big demand.
I'm in huge demand as a Dudist minister.
Okay, have you met the dude himself?
I haven't met him. I did come close seeing him live in concert, but I have not met him.
Oh, you sound...
But you know what? I don't want to meet him. I love Jeff Bridges, and like all my heroes, I've met some of them, which has been wonderful. Luckily, I haven't had a bad experience, but I'd rather leave him where he is for me.
Okay. You said you have heroes, and we didn't talk about your grandfather.
Yeah.
We have less than 30 seconds. Tell us about your grandfather, who you said has been a huge influence on you growing up in Canada.
Well, my grandfather and my father taught me everything I know about being a man. And my grandfather served the Allies in World War II, and he was an incredibly honorable man, incredible values, loved his family dearly. And he gave me my love of the sea, and
he called you something.
He said he told me I was the bestest boy in the world.
And that stayed with you.
Well, and in many ways, I've tried to live my life to try to be the man that my grandfather wanted me to be, and that my father and mother want me to be.
Chris, it was a pleasure to have you and talk to you and find out about your story. And you are a legendary co-author.
Bless you.
You're the legendary co-author of Play Bigger. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
I guess you're not coming back to work anymore. You're retired now.
I'm retired. I am doing a few things in the business world, but I'm focused on a lot of other things in life as well.
We wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you missed any of our shows, you can watch them on our YouTube channel. We'll be back again next week with another episode of our show. Until then, goodbye.